He came to play. He left with a legacy. Kale Stranix, a Solari, an athlete, and an accidental icon, didn't mean to shake the galaxy. But after a game that rewrote history and a recovery that stunned science, his story would no longer be just about G-Ball. It was about what it meant to be Solari, in a galaxy still learning. The first thing Kyle felt was pain. Not a ton of it, actually. Same kind of pain you might wake up with if you slept funny, but he wasn't sure how you could sleep funny on your entire body. Memories came flooding back in an instant. The darkness of non-experience washed away just as easily as an uninteresting dream by the events of the day before. G-Ball. He did it. They did it. The team. It's a team game. Team effort. But still, Kale felt pride for his part in it. He just hoped the others would feel the same as him. The last thing he wanted was to start hearing news about. In other news, everyone's newest favorite superstar, Kale Stranix, also known as Hansen's Comet, is confirmed to have made it to Luminar's most prestigious medical facility for treatment after his shocking collapse, following a record-breaking performance in what will surely turn out to be the most famous G-Ball game in Galactic history. God damn it. Sound came back next, followed rapidly by all the other senses, as Kale opened his eyes and found himself in a hospital bed, complete with IV, heart monitor, and an all-too-annoying television set currently on a news channel covering yesterday's game. And apparently, Kyle's record-breaking performance in it can't have been long then, which makes sense. Movies and games like to make it seem like you can just knock someone out for a few hours, but that's not how unconsciousness actually works. If you're out longer than a few minutes from pure concussive force, that's brain damage. In Kyle's case, adrenaline crash most likely. Sheer exhaustion. Funny, he hadn't felt that tired during the game. But that's how adrenaline works. You don't actually tend to notice it until after the fact. And Kyle noticed hard enough to go right to sleep for however long it was. He craned his neck to try and find a clock and... Ow. Yep, there it is. The real pain. Whole body soreness. Shocking, stabbing, burning as soon as he tried to move a muscle. He must have tore something. He unconsciously took a deep breath, which very rapidly became a conscious halting of that breath, as his ribs felt like they were stabbing him. Kale likes to think that he isn't the type to downplay the seriousness of things. He doesn't want to come off as being haughty or arrogant, but it's only now that he realizes he hadn't been taking G-Ball seriously until those frost tales didn't. Underhanded, cheating rat. Well, you get the idea. Kale chastised himself. They're people too. He doesn't know their situation. People don't do anything without some kind of reason, even if it's a bad one, or a silly one, or a condition of some kind. Trying to kill someone doesn't seem like something you do for a silly reason or because of a condition. But he can't be hasty in judging their reason bad. The players themselves might have been forced into it somehow by external reasons. As much as Kale wanted to hate them for what they tried to do, he knew that he couldn't let himself do so. That would make him know better. Kyle's brooding was interrupted by a doctor coming in. Dr. Soffenhut, to be specific. Same one that saw him when he got sunburned, and one of the three that there was to record data on Kyle's exercise routine. He had a suspicion before, but this seals the deal in confirming that Soffenhut must be one of the medical bigwigs, probably assigned to Kyle personally, despite not being a personal doctor. Probably because his father paid big bucks for the privilege, as usual. The doctor, for his part, at least did Kyle the courtesy of not looking shocked. I had a suspicion that it wouldn't be long before you'd awoken, yet somehow I am always surprised at just how much I underestimate you. I thought you'd be out for at least a day or two. It's barely been an hour since you were admitted. Thanks to the tests you allowed us to run, I was able to calibrate the medical equipment to account for Solari resilience. It shouldn't be sending any false alarms, but just in case, I will be close by to monitor your status personally and make sure that the machines didn't miss anything vital. Kyle tried to nod, but immediately regretted it, followed by the doctor chastising him. Now, you may be a good deal more durable than most species, but you are still mortal. You should refrain from movement of any kind until your body's natural healing capabilities have done their work. There were many who advocated for immediately placing you in a rejuvenation tank, but it was I who informed them of the very recent discoveries in the field of Solari regeneration. When they pressed for it anyways, I warned that we have no idea how the Solari body might respond to the procedure, and your life was not truly in danger. That helped them to understand the needlessness of that risk. Kyle settled for speech, only to find that even talking moved his chest enough for dull pain. Okay, Doc. It sounds good to me. Thank you. So, what's the damage? Dr. Safin, or is it just Dr. Hutt? Just the full name, every time. Kyle decided that his full name was few enough syllables. Dr. Safin Hutt analyzed the equipment around the room, as well as some holographic displays, and even showed some of them to Kyle. Well, considering what you went through, the damage is shockingly light. I took the liberty of conducting research into Solara-based sports-related injuries, and it seems that even by your own people's standards, you are rather lucky. An incident like that, where nearly half an entire team tackles a single player all at once during a game of, football, has actually happened, and the damage was severe enough to put that player out of the game for the rest of their lives. Though the fact that they lived it all, considering Solara's gravity, is a testament to your people's sheer tenacity. He pulled up holographic X-rays. As far as long-term damage is concerned, I am unsure. Most of your ribs have suffered stress fractures, and one of them is broken entirely. Nearly every major muscle group shows signs of what would be severe tearing in other species, but, for you should recover in several days, possibly a week or two. Most of the internal bleeding has already ceased, which in most species would be something of a halfway point in recovery. But again, with Solaris, it is difficult to tell. Solara's records of such things, what few we have been given, are shockingly inconsistent. For damage like this, it could recover in a matter of days. Others, it could remain for months. Another puzzle for medical science to decipher. The television took this moment to fill the brief silence that followed. In response to the stunning display of strength, the G-Ball Rules Committee has authorized a revision of the traditional G-Ball technology, the first revision in nearly 100 years. It seems that Hansen's Comet really is a once-in-a-lifetime event. From now on, the maximum strength of the field should exceed what even Solari Super Sapient strength can muster. But this leaves us all with one question. Where will Kale Stranix go next? Will Hansen's Comet strike again? Kale groaned in disgust at the sensationalization of his name. Seriously, do they have to make me sound so... Ugh, the doctor commented. I think it's rather appropriate. It really did look like a comet trail. Kale quirked an eyebrow at this. You watched G-Ball? Kale didn't need to know a thing about Ori and biology to tell the doctor was embarrassed. Well, I mean, everyone has their own interests, even if they might not align with expectations. They shared a laugh. Well, the doctor did. Kyle gurgled in pain the instant his diaphragm went to war with his rib cage. A week or so later, Kyle was still in the bed, feeling much better but still in a great deal of pain. The doctor stepped in for his usual check-in. And how are we feeling, Mr. Hansen? Kael took a deep breath, wincing as his ribs are definitely still fractured. Ribs can take weeks to heal. Better, still sore all over. Ribs still, yeah. But, otherwise, it's great. Dr. Saffenhoff nodded in satisfaction. It's good. Very good to hear. Now that I've had some time to measure your progress, I can place a rough estimate for your recovery at about 5 weeks or so from today. But from what I can gather, from what little extra information I could collect, you should be free to move about and return to your classes. Just don't go doing anything physically extraneous. No G-ball practice and certainly no exercise. Do you understand? Kael nodded. Yep, not my first rodeo. I used to play football back on Solara. The doctor shook his head softly. Why am I not surprised? To which Kael could only offer an embarrassed smile. Yeah, what can I say? I like playing rough. Anyways, so I'm good to go? Doctor's orders are no serious movements. He nodded this time. He's gotten good at Solari mannerisms, and Kael appreciated his dedication to friendliness. Yes, no serious movement. That's it. Anyone else would be resigned to a rejuvenation tank for quite a while. My assistants and colleagues have taken to calling Solaris the Immortal Deathworlders. After your stunning displays of deathly defiance, Kael could only offer a sigh. Of course they are. Guess I'm gonna have to start apologizing to every member of my species for the special treatment. They shared another laugh. This time, Kael was actually able to participate, if painfully. Almost as soon as Kael was out of the Luminar's hospital, he was assailed by a mob of students all trying to talk to him. How did you... Can I get your autograph? What was it like? You go out with me. Among other things, Kael could barely pay attention to any of them through the clamor. He tried to speak up to ward them off, but the pain in his rib prevented him. A handful of nurses and security guards also tried to intervene, and were moderately successful in buying Kael some space. Old habits and training kicked in. Kael started his crowd routine of just smiling and waving, and answering no questions as he tried to make his way out. At last, a single loud voice managed to ring over the chaos thanks to a handful of speaker drones. It was the Dean, Nurhan Oubliette. Attention, all students. I understand that many of you are excited to make a new friend, but please remember to be respectful of personal space. Just because someone has left the hospital does not mean that they are fully healed, only that they no longer require further treatment. The voice of reason, when projected so loudly, was enough to dissuade a significant number of the crowd and give the security guards time to push back the stubborn few that remained. No, Mr. Hansen, if you would. I would like to see you in my office for a private discussion. A smaller drone, more softly broadcasted from nearer to Kael. Kael simply nodded and spoke. Yes, sir, and thank you. Please, you may simply call me Mr. Oubliette. I believe that is the proper title in Solari language. Kael had a faint smile. Yes, Mr. Oubliette it is. I'll be right there, though I hope you don't mind if I stop by somewhere first. Not at all, Mr. Hansen. His understanding came to the drone clear as day, despite the lack of expression. Take as much time as you need. There is no rush. Kael sighed in relief. Great. Ah, perfect. No offense, but hospital food on any planet sucks. I really need to hit the cafe. Kael could almost hear the smile of mutual understanding. I understand. See you soon. His walk to the cafe was, unfortunately, eventful, despite the dean's stern reminder to the students. But at least it wasn't so bad that he couldn't walk. On his first days here at the Luminar, it was a hot topic. Someone people were talking about, but in hush whispers, or typical gossip circuits. Now, he was famous. Nearly everyone he passed in the hallway stopped to greet him or ask him a question, or otherwise try something. No, I'm not indestructible. I'm still hurt. Actually, just not bad enough that I can't walk. Yes, it was on purpose. The first time I did was actually during the tryout for the team. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. They really had it out for me. No, I don't molt. It all passed in a blur. Names, faces, only some of which he might remember. Not even Lariel could penetrate the crowd to get to him, despite her own popularity. Every cloud has a silver lining, Kale thought. He couldn't even take the time to appreciate the Academy's usual stunning scenery and architecture. Gold trims, transparent panes, holographic art pieces, all of it obscured by the tide of onlookers and curious students. It was only when he'd made it to the elevator that he could get one bit of breathing space. "Would you mind if I take this elevator alone? My ribs are still a bit fractured and I don't want to risk making it worse in a crowded elevator." That, thankfully, was enough to get people to step back. At least here in the Academy, the students were more polite than a Solari crowd would be back on Solara. As the elevator lifted them up towards the top of the spire, where the more prestigious parts of the Academy were, such as the cafe in the museum, which Rock actually has yet to visit, he finally had some time to appreciate the vista. The elevators near the top of the spire were all external, both for structural reasons and aesthetic ones. The view from up here really is breathtaking, a glittering landscape of gold, bronze, and white. Clouds rolled like waves around the tips of the 100 spires. Engine trails from shuttles and freighters twinkled like highway headlights in a New York time-lapse video. Except this was real time. From up here, the minutiae and details of the city the Academy rested in all seemed to flatten into a colorful panorama of urban life. He hadn't visited the city yet either, or really done anything besides sit in his dorms or wander the Academy or hang out with Dren. He really ought to take the time to get to know this place. He's going to be spending at least a few years here anyways. He can't spend years brooding in his private dorm out of spite for his father. And as much as he likes the sport, he doesn't want to make his entire life revolve around G-Ball. He has no plans of truly going professional. Once he's no longer attending the Academy, he'll have bigger things to worry about. He wondered briefly where Dren was, and he resolved to find him later. Kyle knew how to get to the spot now, so chances are he could just wait there for however long it took Dren to visit. Once he had some time away from the crowd, anyways, the last thing he wanted was to end up dragging a crowd to the one place in the spire. Dren and himself could go to get away from things. He didn't spend much time at the cafe. He immediately visited the central restaurant, usually reserved for staff, both because the head chef gave him special permission, thanks to Kyle's contributions to his cookbook, and because the other students were literally denied entry. It was the only way he could eat in peace. The staff themselves were significantly more respectful than the student body, thankfully, and didn't bother him, despite the obvious glances of curiosity. Once Kale sat down, one of the servers hurriedly went to the kitchen, and within moments Mohil chef Jalvon, Orion head chef of Luminar Cafe, and one of the most renowned chefs in the entire galaxy, emerged boisterous. Kale Stranix, the Immortal Deathworlder. Kale groaned with a hand up to his face. "Please don't call me that." To which Chef Shalvon immediately retreated and bowed his head, the intricate patterns of his face glittering in the lighting of the restaurant. Deepest apologies, Mr. Hansen. I did not think you were worse to fame." Kale replied matter-of-factly, "Most people aren't." For his part, Chef Yalvon did not allow for awkward silence. "Now, let us speak no further of outside matters. Here is a sacred place. Food is the subject. Let us not dilute it. What shall I serve you?" Kyle couldn't help but smile at the almost theatrical performance. Any recommendations? Now it was Mohil's turn to smile. Well, I do believe we have finally finished our experiments with sourdough. Would you care to try some? Toasted, perhaps as the bed to a fine mound of Russerdale fowl, marinated in a complement of interstellar spices. That sounds heavenly, Cale asked, mentally drooling at the thorn. Excellent. It shall be prepared and ready in a scant few minutes. The fowl is slow roasted throughout the day. I need only toast the bread and briefly prepare some light vegetables. Kyle curiously tilted his head now. Any condiments for it? A twinkle found its way into Chef Zalvon's eyes, though perhaps a trick of the light dancing off his cheek. Ha, ha. The so-called mayo you informed me of? Ah, yes, I have a tub prepared exactly to your specifications. Although it took a few tries to get the consistency you described. Kyle nodded now with a wide grin. Perfect. And, make sure there's 2 slices of sourdough, one on top, the other bottom, so I can hold the whole thing in my hands to eat. Buccal cocked his head laterally. Ah, I see. Very practical. Less mess, fewer silverware to clean, and an excellent excuse to have more of this wondrous bread. Cale chuckled. Yeah, we call it a sandwich, but this only elicited confusion from the chef. It's quite an odd name. I can only imagine what cultural history lies behind calling an item a food after a mystical silicate mage. To which Kyle painfully lost a full-bodied laugh. Ow! Ow! Oh, it's not that kind of witch. To which Talur nearly smiled, bowed, and set about his work. To call it the single most divine sandwich Kyle had ever eaten would be an understatement. There are those who would mock visiting a prestigious restaurant for something so simple, but they would be naive and foolish. It takes a chef of paramount skill to elevate such a basic dish to the highest possible level. Kyle recognized none of the flavors, but found all of them familiar in just the right ways. The bread was perfectly toasted, with a satisfying crunch, yet retained its soft, fluffy interior. The sourdough flavor coming through in elegant notes unlike any Kyle had ever tasted. There was simply no analog to which he could compare. It was unique to the cafe, as any good sourdough truly is. The Russerdale fowl, some kind of alien duck, was exactly as advertised. Slow roasted and pre-marinated in a variety of spices, Cale could only call rich, savory, and exactly the correct amount of salty. The duck's skin was perfectly cooked, crispy like a pork rind, whilst containing tender slabs of fatty protein that oozed their buttery juices, which mixed so well with the fluffy and absorbent bread. The mayo, of course lightly applied so as not to overwhelm the other ingredients, brought an acidic note that cut through the fattiness in just the right way. The various vegetables, all light and complementary additions that perfectly served their purpose of balancing out the heavy fatty duck and calorically dense bread. A medley of unique flavors that Kyle could close his eyes and savor for what felt like an eternity. Though he was remiss to find, when he opened them, the last bite had occurred barely 10 minutes after the first. Why must time be so tempestuous? Why must all that is good conclude so quickly? His satisfaction was clear as day upon his face. Neither he nor Chef Talur needed to speak any further. They both knew that the perfection of the sandwich spoke for itself. A simple bow was their final exchange as Kyle departed the cafe. The security guard offered to escort him out, and he gladly accepted. He didn't want another mob of students to rob him so quickly of the flavors that still danced upon his tongue. As he once again entered the elevator alone, Cale thought this the perfect chance to find Dren. No other students around, no one quite knowing where he's going. He ordered the elevator up to its highest level. From there, it was a simple matter of walking the ever-thinning breadth of the top of the spire to a lonely staircase which rose to the highest ledge of the spire, as close to the roof access as such a pointed structure could have. The atmospheric shielding still worked, even up here, but it was somewhat weaker. Wind blew hard enough to be heard even from within the spire, though it wasn't quite the deafening wail of high-altitude winds at the top of a mountain, more like a hollow breeze that softly caressed the edges of the otherwise echoing ambiance of this mostly empty portion of the spire. There was little here besides maintenance shafts and the occasional buzz of a maintenance drone. As Kyle steadily took each step on the stairs, he could also hear the faint echo of someone tapping away on a datapad. He lightly smiled, exactly as he expected. Dren's already here. The door to the ledge, a small and simple balcony likely meant for maintenance drones to be able to exit or enter the spire from near its top, was slightly ajar. Kyle pushed it open and spoke. "Hey, buddy, Why are you here?" Dren said, almost spitting. Kyle's expression froze, then cracked like glass in confusion. "What? I just wanted to..." Dren elaborated, though his voice didn't hold anger or hate, just disappointment. "You don't need me anymore. You got the influence you wanted. You can avoid Lariel any way you want now. We were only pretending to be buddies, remember?" Kale's voice actually broke slightly as he struggled to find the words. I wanted to, you." Dren's expression remained mostly unchanged. His ears were flat. His tail was unmoving, curled up around his legs. His eyes focused on his datapad, but in the way someone focuses on an object a mile away. He sighed. "Perhaps I spoke too harshly. It's fine. I understand why you did it. I was the fool for letting myself believe that someone actually cared." Kyle's confusion trided itself for disappointment, soft loathing. Dren was right. Kyle used him. He may not have done it with any real malicious intent, but it was the truth. The reason Kyle spoke to Dren that day, learned about his secret hiding spot, and started hanging out with him was all because Kyle wanted an excuse to avoid Lariel. It was selfish, childish. Kyle wanted to kick himself, but that might just make his rib break worse. He struggled to find the words for a moment. You're right. I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to use you like that. Friends should be made for the right reasons, for the sake of being friends and not for practicality. Dren's ears perked up slightly, and his face turned only marginally away from his datapad. "Then you understand. I would prefer to be alone." Kale spoke more forwardly. "So let's start off on the right foot this time." Dren's head turned completely now, tilted in confusion. "I don't see how which foot one starts on is relevant to..." Kale held out a hand and a wide smile, interrupting Dren. "Hi, my name is Kyle Hansen. Pompous, spoiled, egotistical, silver spoon son of the richest Solari to have ever lived. I like sports, games, shooting stuff, and blowing off gold diggers in any way possible. My worst fear is becoming like my father. And my favorite food is a sandwich that I just ate for the first time 10 minutes ago at the Luminar Cafe." Kyle bore his heart out, in all its irreverent, self-aware, and self-deprecating vulnerability. Dren looked at Kyle, then looked at his outstretched hand, then at his datapad, and then back to Kyle. His mouth opened slightly, in what looked as close to a grin as an anthropomorphic wolf could achieve. "I am Dren Evakidu. First of all, fear to have ever left the homeworld. I abandoned my pack without knowing the true value of what I exchanged for a chance at enlightenment. And now, I can never go back. I like quantum physics, engineering, and theoretical mathematics. My worst fear is never seeing my mother again. My favorite food is the Russerdale fowl, though I do not often get the tickets needed to visit Chef Tolua's restaurant in the middle of the cafe. Kyle smiled widely and stretched out his hand further. Friends. Dren's tail began to move again as he tentatively accepted Kyle's hand. Friends. Then Dren's cackle shot up in surprise as Kyle yanked him into a hug. There, the right foot. Also, we should eat at the cafe together. I got an all-access pass to Mokale's place, and I doubt he'd care if I brought a +1. Dren's tail moved more energetically now. Truly? You would do that for me? Kale smiled. Of course. What are friends for? Dren tilted his head. I do not truly know, but I think I am soon to learn. Kale laughed, despite the pain it brought him, and Dren's taking of the metaphor at face value, and patted Dren on the back. You absolutely will. I'll see to it. Now, I did just eat 10 minutes ago, but honestly, I would kill for another one of those sandwiches. Come on, it's my treat. Not that anyone actually pays for anything at the cafe. Just as Kyle said, Mokale did not care that he brought Dren along with him. If anything, he was excited to be able to test the palate of a species he'd never encountered before. As Kyle savored his second divine sandwich, Dren practically inhaled an entire Russerdale fowl, to which Kyle could only jokingly chastise him. Whoa, slow down there, man. No one's gonna steal it from you. Take some time. Really, savor the flavor. Dren, looking disheveled like a dog pouring every last ounce of energy into devouring its food, looked up, clearly somewhat embarrassed, and quickly cleaning himself and adjusting his slightly out-of-place spectacles. Apologies. Old habits are difficult to overcome. I'm not accustomed to such plenty, even after multiple years at the academy. But Kyle could only offer his most disarming of smiles. It's all right, man. There's no need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. Like I said, no one here is going to take it from you, and it is far from the last one that you'll ever have. I'll see to that. Dren nodded. Yes, I like that. Then he dug into it again like a wild animal, though slightly more reserved than before. Kale found it funny, considering how quiet and reserved Dren usually is. Eventually, however, they did part at the cafe. Dren has classes every single day, and Kale still has to meet up with the dean, so that's where he went. Much like the elevator ride up to Dren's lunch, the one that went up to the dean's office was similarly incredible. Kale hoped he would never get tired of it. He can't imagine the travesty that would be becoming blind to such a beauty. In fact, he vowed to himself to make sure he doesn't. Once the elevator dinged, Kyle ripped his gaze away and beheld a different sort of beauty. Not one he was particularly fond of, however, as it reminded him so much of his father's tastes. A sleek hallway led from the door, tall, vaulted ceiling with the walls neatly sectioned by vast floor-to-ceiling paintings. Yes, actual paintings rather than the typical high-tech holographic art pieces. Each one seemed to depict a different part of the Academy's history, also representing, even if not depicting, one of the 100 spires. 100 paintings in all, 50 on each side, in this very long hallway. The early paintings seemed to concern the earliest days of the Academy, back before the Orions had ever achieved FTL, and were setting up a colony for the first time on Aureus II. Notably, it wasn't overtly habitable. In fact, it looked kind of like the moon, but obviously bigger. After that were many of the classic colonial steps. Infrastructure, growth, the first spire. Apparently, the Orions default to spires when they build things. It wasn't an engineering convention. One of the paintings depicted what seemed to be the first atmospheric processor. though notably the clouds it vouched were dark and smoky, probably because the Orions were making a planet more like their home world before they had thought of accommodation for other species. It was around the 30th painting when anything recognizable as the Sunspire appeared. It was also when the Dean's voice echoed down from the hall. "I see you share an appreciation for art and history." Cale turned to see the Dean, slowly walking down to meet him, and called back, "Not really. No. I was just curious is all. Wondered how something like a planet-wide city happened. I see it wasn't a pre-planned deal." Even from here, Cale could see him lightly tilting his head back, a mannerism he recognized from Professor Oubliette. He wondered if the two were related. Ah, yes, it wasn't. It all began as a humble colony, a research outpost, to be specific. Academic roots that eventually sprouted into the great tree of enlightenment that we have today. His voice grew louder as he finally approached to a more reasonable conversational distance. First 1 spire, then 2, eventually 10. As students become teachers and other things, the city grew up around them, joining the spires. New ones kept being added, until eventually one of the original designers decided that the 100 was a nice poetic number. From there, we built upwards. It took dozens of generations before the entire planet had become a single grand city, even if the vast majority of it is relatively sparsely populated agri-industrial districts. Sure, we could take the route that Aureus Prime did and rely entirely on imports for supplies. But we wanted something else. We wanted to be self-sustaining so that we could remain detached from the economics and politics of the greater galaxy. A detachment that has protected us for centuries and allowed us to become the beacon of learning and acceptance that we are today. Though not, of course, we still depend on regular deliveries of entangled particles for our communications. Some things just can't be gotten around. They walked as he talked, also like Kael's father. If not for the obvious physical differences, Kael would have believed the Dean a long-lost uncle. He continued with a question. "So, Mr. Hansen, how has your time at the Academy been so far?" Kael gave his genuine answer. "Great. Better than I was expecting. Though, to be fair, I wasn't expecting much. Thought it would just be another campus like any other. But I can't say I'm not impressed with what I've experienced. Outliers aside, most everyone's friendly. I can't speak to the accommodations because my father paid for private ones. But the cafe is great, and the professors at least seem to love their work." Notably, Kael did not mention anything about the gorgeous views and vistas and other various aesthetic aspects. It hasn't really been long enough for me to really judge the curriculum, but the classes have been interesting so far. I can tell that there is much for me to learn here. Environment's great. As you say, it seems mostly insulated from the outside world. There's news broadcasts and all, but it seems like the Academy and the city mostly focus on internal events. Now, speaking of, I assume the reason that I haven't been swamped with reporters has something to do with the reason you helped break up the crowd of students that swarmed me. Back on Solara, something like this happens, and I would spend weeks evading the paparazzi. He laughed in actual full-bodied laugh. Kael had wondered before today if it was even possible for most species to laugh, or if that was also somehow unique to Solariety. Now it seems like everyone's doing it. I guess it took him a bit to find a stride, humor-wise. The Dean quickly recovered. No. Please, have at least some faith in the Academy. I'm sure you've been unimpressed with our procedures thus far, given how often you've caught us off guard. But we are the most prestigious academy in the galaxy, you know. Warding off new scavengers is a trivial task. No, as long as you walk these halls, you will be safe from external forces, be they political or economic. The Academy takes pride in the safety and well-being of its students and of its 100 spires. None are safer than this, the Luminar Spire. It was at that precise moment that all the lights cut out with a booming thud. As it seemed, the power shut off. The dull hum of the atmospheric shield gave way to the howl of high-speed winds as metal screeched and warped, though thankfully the spire itself seemed to hold. Distantly, screams of shocked students could be heard resonating up to the superstructure. After a moment, the dull red of emergency power lights flickered on, and the hum of the atmospheric shield returned, if with the occasional sputter. And then a voice rang out, echoing up and down the long hallway and all throughout the entire spire, as every drone, speaker, intercom, and even personal communication devices spoke in unison, in a gruff and openly venomous voice. Cower, soft-scale weaklings of the vaunted Luminar Spire. I am Pirate Lord Kurfix, Lord Karzun of the Welltree Fleet, and I am here for one reason and one reason only. Booms echoed as the spire shook from distant explosions, likely near its more structurally sound base. Give me Brooke Hansen, or your precious Academy shall burn. Thanks for tuning in to another episode, and if you like the Luminar Spire series, there is more of it right here. Is this thing? Are we still recording? As Pirate Lord Karzun's ultimatum rang through the broken systems of the Luminar Spire, KL didn't feel fear. He felt resolve, because for the first time, the entire galaxy would stop seeing him as a headline, a hologram, or a comet. Now they'd see him as what he always was, a kid who just wanted to play, and who ended up becoming a symbol of something bigger. And symbols don't run, they shine.